وأتوب إليه. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. صلوات please. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. صلوات. اللهم صل على Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters. Apologies for the slight delay. In this khutbah, I wanted to share with you the approach of Imam Ali alayhi salam in explaining spirituality, in explaining how people themselves should improve in their lives. And I say that because, according to my small research, in Nahjul Balagha, Imam Ali Islam is very open, very public about concepts and ideas that you and I are familiar with, like understanding the Quran, like improving ourselves, politics, the khulafa at the time, and perhaps issues that he was trying to resolve. Even people that were disputing with him about the interpretation of the Quran, like the Khawarij. And this might sound like a very simple point, but it seems to me that when we read the sermons of Nahjul Balagha, like, I'm giving this sermon, or you are giving a sermon to me in public, Imam Ali did not withhold ideas and concepts about Islam from the people, even if those concepts were very deep and very challenging. Now, I am not Imam Ali alayhi salam. I'm not as eloquent as Imam Ali alayhi salam. Imam Ali, mashallah, the way he put things in Arabic, very eloquent, very succinct, very beautiful, but very penetrating. And of course, traditionally, the first khutbah is very much about taqwa, that we advise each other to be God conscious. So I want to read to you one line only from Sermon 87 of Nahjul Balagha, which the Urafa, the mystics, consider as to be one of the greatest sermons in the Islamic tradition about how to become spiritual. Imam Ali says, Ibadallah, servants of Allah, Inna min ahabba ibadillahi ilayhi abdan a'anahu Allahu ala nafsih. He says, indeed, one from amongst the one that Allah loves, the servants of Allah that Allah loves, is the one that Allah has given power over him, a'anahullah, power or control over him, upon his nafs, upon his soul. So you can say the most beloved, the most beloved servants of Allah, the one that Allah loves, is the one that Allah gives power over himself, over his nafs. Very nice, very simple actually. It tells us that when Imam Ali was advising people about being Muslim and being spiritual and how to be a good person, he did not mention salah and saum and zakat and khums and all of these things. He simply mentioned that if you and I are to be good Muslims, good human beings, we have to be able to discipline our desires, bad desires, whether it's anger, backbiting, whatever it is, greediness. And that control is the control that Allah loves. And we become the most beloved. In fact, that is what we have been discussing in the last few lectures, that our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahumma salli ala, that arguably the only reason that Allah decided to bestow his lutf or his grace upon him is because the Prophet tried to discipline his intellect and nafs from not being like those other people that were degrading him or responding to him in such an inhumane way. That is what sets us, the Prophet, apart from those people. Number two, it also tells us that whenever we are discussing things from the mimbar, pulpit, or in the community, we should not be afraid of explaining deep concepts to people, but of course in accordance with everyone's intellect, as per the Prophet's hadith. So it's not that we should not tell people things, we should tell people everything, but in measured doses and in accordance with what people can understand. So if you look at the end of Nahjul Balagha and in other compilations, Imam Ali has deeper conversations with Kumail ibn Ziyad, about secrets of knowledge and searching for knowledge. And so those conversations, for those interested, like if you want to join this Hawza, for example, and you want to study under respected teachers, those conversations can take place. But it doesn't mean that Imam Ali, it appears in my reading, would keep anything away from the public. And that tells us that Imam Ali was giving confidence to people about understanding Islam, researching Islam, and trying to be as close to the prophetic way and prophetic experience. Salawat, please. And the last thing before I end this khutbah, I try to make it quite express because people are working and things. Don't a big majlis, yes? Okay. So the second thing, he gives a nice technique here. He says that the person that has control over himself and feels things for Allah and is sad or has grief about his or her sins, there is a misbahul huda. That's the phrase he uses. There is a lamp of guidance that Allah puts in that person's heart. Very beautiful. He's saying that control that we have over our desires, at that point, Allah begins to guide us. Like, what is the right action and the right thing to speak in this circumstance? Again, I've been trying to say this in the lectures, but hopefully I'm clarifying, yes? That, no, when we say, why aren't my du'as answered? We often say this. Now, there are other reasons for this, like maslaha and benefit and wisdom, but why, when I'm praying, how come I don't feel anything? Or why, my dua is not answered? Maybe one reason is that if our desires are always fluctuating and we are committing sins, or sometimes we're doing good deeds, and then maybe another time we will commit a sin. This is human experience. But the time where maybe in those hours or in the day where actually we really feel that we have not committed a sin, that is when we begin to hear that voice of Allah and we begin to be guided. So my dua for myself first and foremost, and inshallah all of us, is that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us a strength to indeed control our desires, and especially in these days where we are doing Azawa and we are remembering the sacrifice of Imam Hussain al-Islam. Ultimately, the whole goal is for us to reform ourselves, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi tayyibin at-tahirin. Salawat, please. In the second khutbah, I wanted to just share with you something a bit practical, which is about the state of the Muslim Ummah and sharing my very small experience in dealing with asylum seekers and reading our Islamic tradition and the advice given from the Quran, from Imam Ali Islam, really about what kind of Islamic or godly society they were trying to create. And to begin with, in letter 53, very early on in that letter in Nahj Balagha, Imam Ali salam tells Malik al-Ashtar, who was the recently appointed governor of Egypt and I think some surrounding areas, he tells Malik, the first thing is that you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you discipline your desires, don't make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala your opponent, your enemy. That means don't do anything against Allah. And then interestingly, he talks a lot about mercy and the treatment of the ra'iyya, the subjects or people. He tells Malik that feel or sense and be aware in your heart the feeling of mercy, of rahmah for the people under you, and not only have mercy, be kind and affectionate to people, and be just with them, do not oppress them. That is arguably one of the first principles in that letter. And I'm saying this to you because apart from sort of teaching and academia and research, the last maybe 4 or 5 years, I've been helping asylum seekers from the Middle Eastern and North African region. And it's something really that it happened maybe by grace of Allah. I was working in a law firm and I was not treated right. It was bullying and discrimination there. And during that process, in the lunch times when people didn't know, I was creating a website, okay? And I was creating a website to help people who were fleeing persecution. The reason I did that is because in that line of work that I was doing, which is immigration and human rights, I was instructing experts, experts who write about Iraq or Yemen or Saudi or Egypt. And I was dealing with these experts of the region who are writing about whether there is persecution in that region or not. So a simple example I'll give you, at the time of ISIL or ISIS, when there was huge turmoil in Iraq and people were fleeing Iraq, a judge in a court would want to know, well, what is ISIS, what is Shia, what is Sunni, and what is happening in the region. Same thing in Egypt, when the Muslim Brotherhood were in ascendancy, and then President Morsi came in power for a very short period. What happened to President Morsi? Then there was a coup d'etat by the military, and then he was overthrown, and then he was imprisoned and killed, right? And so what is the ideology of Muslim Brotherhood within the original Arabic documents? As an example, what is human dignity in Islam? So I found that experts were writing about these things. So I told myself, but wait, by grace of Allah, okay, I have been taught by respected teachers at Al-Mahdi Institute. I have done some further studies. I am not some big person or grand scholar or anything like that. But with my law background, I feel I can help. Now, the only reason I've told you this is not about myself. It's because when I was dealing with, and I have been dealing with asylum seekers, and I'm writing the reports, I have read maybe 200 witness statements. 200 witness statements from 90 to 95% Muslim asylum seekers who are fleeing these regions. And I've come across two things which I'm sharing with you. All of them say the same thing. Whether the government is Sunni, whether the government is Shia, whether you're talking about Bahrain, Morocco, Egypt, Iraq, it doesn't matter. They all say that my government has been oppressive to me. Same statement in 200 witness statements. They say my Muslim government has been oppressive to my human dignity. I don't have freedom of expression. I can't form my own political party. As a woman, I feel my dignity is insulted and my rights are not respected. Now, whether that is a voice in the government, whether that is a right to a divorce, as an example, a fiqhi issue, whether that is men not respecting women, or whether there is an honor killing, and because a boy and a girl have a relationship outside of marriage, occasionally or sometimes, I'm not saying this is in every Muslim country, but in certain upper regions of Muslim countries, honor killings still occur, and that girl or boy is killed or harmed. Then number two, these Muslim asylum seekers, where do? They flee here to the UK. A few other countries, but they flee here. And their journey is very difficult. It's like they cross the border from Iran to Turkey, and then Turkey, let's say, to Italy, then Italy to France, and then you all have seen the pictures of the boat, going on the boat and not surviving. Then they go to the jungle in France, and then they come here on the back of a lorry. Number three is that when they come to this country, they're looking for one thing only, one thing, and that's freedom. That's it. They're looking for hurriya. Just freedom that they can be themselves. You know, they whatever relationships they want to have, they can have. If they want to vote or not vote, they can do so. If they want to have a right of divorce, they can have a right of divorce. They just want basic freedom to be themselves and also to practice their religion as good Muslims. That's it. They don't want anything else. Now, I'm just sharing these facts with you. I'm not saying that West is perfect. And you can see in the recent Gaza episode, what is still continuing, that the parties, instead of standing up for Palestinians, they are yielding to Israeli and Zionist lobbies. So this is not to say that human rights is perfect here. Nothing like that. All I am saying is, maybe, just maybe, we have maybe missed the spirit of the Quran and Imam Ali alayhi salam in creating a godly society that is fundamentally based on freedom and human dignity. Nobody is saying that we want lewd conduct or immoral conduct. But do we have a right to take away people's freedoms, whether it is through fiqh, whether it is through theology, or whether it is through an Islamic government? Just because it is an Islamic country, does it mean it will be an Islamic country in the way we treat people? What it tells us is this advice of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam still rings true today. Do we have rulers? Do we have scholars? Do we have community members that are able to treat people with mercy and justice from the Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam? There's a verse in the Quran, I think it is from Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 8, if I'm correct. Yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'dilu aqrabu min at-taqwa, if I'm correct. Be just, it is closer than God consciousness. So it is closer to God consciousness. So i'dilu, be just, it is closest to God consciousness. Okay? So that is from the Quran. Be just, because by being just to each other, we become godly. And so I leave you with this point and I will end. When we go for Hajj and when we go for Umrah and Ziyarat, Allah give us the risk, inshallah, to do so. When we are going then, we are saying we want a spiritual experience or our sins to be forgiven. I think there is one thing to remember. We are performing these particular obligations or mustahab actions in perhaps environments that may be oppressive, or where there is poverty, where the economy is not good. And so I always ask myself a question, which is, maybe when we struggle to be spiritual, is it because the wider society is not spiritual or the wider society is not healthy? So Imam Ali's spirituality wasn't rooted just only in the salah and the zakat. He was going around in Kufa giving bread and giving money and giving means to people. And so when Ali ibn Abi Talib was martyred in Masjid al-Kufa, what did people say? According to whatever reports we have, they say, where is our father? Where is that one who comes to us at night, who comes to us during the daytime and gives us food? Where is the one who is going to look after our orphans and widows? This is how they remembered Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And so it's a question for you, whether you want to talk about Muslim governments, whether you want to talk about this country, whether we are fulfilling that beautiful legacy which these godly saints left. Salawat, please. Please, can we end this khutbah by praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that certainly He gives us the intellect and the wisdom to understand these principles of the Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, that we can apply it to our society, that when we return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can say that we try to be sincere servants of you. And we ask Allah, especially on this blessed day of Friday, to alleviate the suffering of people around the world. Give us the strength to do so. And may He forgive the sins, our sins, marhumin sins, and hasten the repentance of the dear 12th Imam. Ajalla Faraj. Surah Al-Fatiha, please. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات يوم يقوم الحساب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد اللهم صل وسلم على محمد خاتم النبيين وفاطمة اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وفاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين اللهم صل على وعلي بن أبي طالب وحسن بن علي والحسين بن علي اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن محمد